My name is Emily, and I've been working in the catering business for over a decade. I'm known for my dedication to creating memorable events and my ability to handle the myriad challenges that come with planning large gatherings. Recently, I found myself in a situation that pushed me to a breaking point. And I've been questioning whether my actions were justified. It all started about 6 months ago when I was approached by a couple, Megan and Tom, to cater their wedding. The wedding was set to take place in 2 weeks, and they had high expectations for their big day. Most of our communication had been through emails, but I met with them twice, once with their wedding coordinator and once more just with the couple, to finalize details. From the outset, I was keenly aware that weddings are typically more driven by the bride's vision, and I made it a priority to cater to Megan's preferences. During our initial meetings, Megan seemed to be the primary decision-maker, which is not uncommon in my line of work. My interactions with Tom were polite and professional. He seemed enthusiastic about the menu and complimentary about the choices. It was clear that Tom appreciated the effort and creativity that went into crafting the menu. The second meeting, however, was when things took a turn. We were finalizing some of the last-minute details when Megan abruptly accused me of flirting with her fiancé. I was taken aback. The accusation came out of nowhere and felt completely unfounded. My interactions with Tom had been nothing but professional, and if anything, I had been more focused on addressing Megan's needs and preferences. Megan's outburst was alarming. She told me that I was being too cutesy and flirty with Tom. She seemed genuinely enraged, and I was stunned by the intensity of her reaction. In my experience, such accusations were rare, especially when I was simply trying to do my job and provide excellent service. Megan's anger only seemed to escalate as she continued to berate me. She even threatened to leave a negative review if I didn't stop my alleged behavior. The situation deteriorated further when Megan turned her ire towards Tom, calling him derogatory names for reacting to my jokes. It became clear that her frustration was not just with me but also with Tom, who seemed bewildered by the sudden outburst. Megan's hostility reached a peak when she insulted me personally, calling me a pathetic cow, and suggesting that I find my own man rather than interfering with hers. At this point, the situation was untenable. I was deeply insulted and felt that the working relationship was beyond repair. I asked Megan and Tom to leave and made the decision to return their deposit. It was a difficult choice, but I felt that the toxic nature of the interaction and the personal attacks were unacceptable. I prioritized my own dignity and the well-being of my team over continuing with a client who clearly had no respect for me. In the days following, Megan began bombarding me with emails and messages. She was frantic, claiming that she couldn't find a replacement catering service on such short notice. Her desperation was palpable, but I remained resolute in my decision. I understood the urgency of her situation, but I couldn't justify continuing to work with someone who had been so disrespectful and accusatory. I also made sure that my employees, who had been scheduled for the event, would still be compensated for the day. Their commitment to their work and their professionalism deserved to be honored, even if the catering gig itself was no longer going forward. Despite my efforts to handle the situation professionally and empathetically, the fallout from the incident has been significant. Megan's anger and the subsequent media blitz of negative comments and complaints have left me feeling deflated. The emotional toll of being unjustly accused and insulted, coupled with the stress of managing the situation, has been considerable. As I reflect on the events, I question whether I made the right choice. On one hand, I feel that standing up for myself and maintaining my professional integrity was essential. On the other hand, I wonder if there was another way to navigate the situation that might have preserved the client relationship while still addressing Megan's concerns. The incident has led me to reevaluate how I handle challenging clients and how I set boundaries in my professional interactions. It has also made me more aware of the potential for miscommunications and misunderstandings, even when intentions are pure. While the immediate consequences of the situation have been difficult, I hope that moving forward, I can use this experience to better manage client relationships and ensure that my team and I continue to provide exceptional service without compromising our values. In the end, I have to trust that I made the right decision based on the information and circumstances at hand. The challenge of balancing professional integrity with client satisfaction is a delicate one. And I hope that time will prove that my actions, though difficult, were justified.
I always thought that vacationing with family would be a great way to bond, to reconnect, and to escape from the everyday grind. My wife, Claire, and I had been planning a one-week vacation for months, using my recent bonus to cover a trip that would take us somewhere warm and relaxing. With the idea of making the trip even more special, I decided to invite my younger sister, Emily, along. Emily had recently gone through a tough breakup. Her fiancé had cheated on her, leaving her heartbroken and disillusioned. I figured a change of scenery and some quality time with family might help lift her spirits. When Emily accepted the invitation, she seemed genuinely excited. I was happy to see her enthusiasm. It felt good to be able to provide a little respite from her recent troubles. We all headed to the hotel, which I had thoughtfully booked with 2 separate rooms, one for Claire and me, and another for Emily. I wanted to make sure Emily had her own space but also felt welcome enough to join us whenever she wished. I even gave her a spare key to our room, thinking it would be convenient for her to pop in and hang out with us whenever she liked. The first few days of the trip were fantastic. The weather was perfect, and we spent our days exploring, dining out, and relaxing on the beach. Emily would often join Claire and me in our room in the mornings as we made plans for the day. She usually wore an oversized shirt, which was her typical casual attire. I noticed Claire seemed a bit off, but I chalked it up to the usual stress of vacation planning and the occasional disagreements that can come with it. However, a few days into the vacation, Emily approached me with a look of sadness. She mentioned that Claire had asked her to dress more modestly around us. Emily, who had always been open and casual around me, seemed hurt and uncomfortable. She asked if she was intruding on our vacation and seemed unsure about how to proceed. I was taken aback. The idea that Claire had asked Emily to change her attire seemed strange to me. I assured Emily that she was not intruding and promised I would talk to Claire about it. When I confronted Claire about the situation, it quickly escalated into a heated argument. Claire had never been particularly close to my family. In fact, she had always expressed a strong dislike for my brother, which had caused some friction between us. So, it was no surprise that she didn't understand the close bond I shared with Emily. Our relationship had always been one of casual ease. Emily and I had always dressed comfortably around each other, even growing up when we lived together. To me, an oversized shirt was nothing to make a fuss about. Claire, however, had a different perspective. She expressed her discomfort with Emily's attire, arguing that Emily should at least wear shorts or something less revealing. It was clear that Claire's discomfort was rooted in her own insecurities and biases rather than any real issue with Emily's clothing. When Claire insisted that my sister needed to dress more modestly, it felt like an unnecessary intrusion on our family dynamic. In the heat of the moment, I said something I now regret. I told Claire that her behavior was so irrational that she should consider going to a mental asylum. My words were harsh and cruel, a reaction born from frustration and an attempt to end the argument. In retrospect, I realized that my comment was not only unkind but also counterproductive. While it did stop the argument, it also left Claire visibly upset and strained our relationship further. Despite the tension, the rest of the vacation proceeded without major incident. We managed to enjoy the remaining days, but the underlying tension was palpable. I tried to focus on making the best of the situation, but the damage had been done. The vacation was not the relaxing escape I had envisioned. Instead, it was marred by conflict and hurt feelings. Returning home, the after-effects of the vacation lingered. Claire was still hurt by the argument, and our relationship felt strained. I was left questioning whether my reaction had been justified or if I had overstepped in my defense of Emily. Claire and I had always been able to resolve our issues, but this particular incident seemed to have left a deeper scar. As I reflect on the situation, I can see how my actions might have been perceived as unfair. Emily was caught in the middle of a conflict that she had not created, and my attempt to stand up for her may have come at the expense of my relationship with Claire. I understand that Claire's request for Emily to dress more modestly was likely influenced by her own insecurities and discomfort, but my response was disproportionate. I also realized that my harsh words about a mental asylum were inappropriate. While they were meant to end the argument and express my frustration, they were hurtful and damaging. I've since apologized to Claire for the hurtful comment, but the impact of that moment still weighs on me. In the end, I have learned that navigating family dynamics and personal relationships requires more sensitivity and understanding. It is important to address issues with empathy rather than reacting in anger. While I stand by my intention to protect Emily, I acknowledge that my approach was flawed and that the way I handled the situation could have been more considerate of Claire's feelings. As we move forward, I hope to repair the rift with Claire and find a way to balance the needs of my family with those of my wife. I also hope to support Emily in a way that respects both her and Claire's feelings. The experience has taught me the importance of communication and the need to handle conflicts with care, especially when it involves those we love. Ultimately, I am left grappling with the question of whether I was justified in my actions or if I simply let my emotions get the better of me. It's a complex situation with no easy answers, but I am committed to learning from it and striving to be a better partner and family member in the future.
When I first met Ryan, I was instantly drawn to his warmth and enthusiasm for life. We had been together for over 3 years, and our relationship had blossomed in many ways. Our shared interests, mutual respect, and genuine affection made me feel like I had found something truly special. As with any relationship, we had our discussions about the future, where to live, our career goals, and, of course, whether or not we wanted to start a family. Ryan and I had always been somewhat vague about the topic of children. We were still in the early stages of our relationship when we casually discussed our long-term plans. Ryan had mentioned that he saw himself having kids someday, while I had always been more non-committal, preferring to focus on the present rather than locking in a rigid vision for the future. However, as time went on, our views on having children became a more pressing issue. It wasn't until a few months ago that we had a serious conversation about it. And it turned out that our stances were fundamentally opposed. Ryan was adamant about wanting to start a family someday. He talked about the joy of parenting, the bond of family, and the legacy he wanted to leave behind. For him, having children was not just a desire, it was a fundamental part of his vision for the future. On the other hand, I was equally resolute in my decision not to have children. My reasons were multifaceted. I had always felt a deep-seated conviction that parenting was not for me. From a young age, I had been very focused on my career, personal growth, and the freedom that came with being child-free. I wanted to explore the world, pursue my passions, and live a life unrestricted by the demands of parenthood. My decision was not made lightly. It was a result of years of introspection and self-awareness. When I finally told Ryan how I felt, it was like a thunderclap. He looked at me with a mixture of shock, hurt, and confusion. He struggled to understand how I could be so resolute. He felt that my unwillingness to compromise was a betrayal of the future we had envisioned together. I explained that my stance was not something I could negotiate or change. It wasn't just a preference, it was a core aspect of who I am and what I envision for my life. Ryan was clearly devastated. He began to question whether our relationship could survive this difference in fundamental values. He felt that my refusal to consider even a potential compromise was unfair and detrimental to our future together. He argued that we were at a crossroads and that my unwillingness to bend on this issue was creating an insurmountable barrier between us. I could see the pain in his eyes, and it tore me apart to know that my decision was causing him so much distress. It wasn't that I didn't understand his desire for children or that I was dismissing his dreams. It was that I could not bring myself to change my fundamental beliefs and desires just to fit into a mold that was not true to who I am. We spent hours talking about it. Or rather, he spent hours pleading with me to reconsider. And I remained firm in my position. It was a painful and emotionally charged conversation. One that left us both feeling raw and vulnerable. I wanted to support Ryan and honor his dreams. But I also knew that I could not sacrifice my own happiness and identity for the sake of compromise. As the days passed, Ryan became increasingly distant. The warmth and affection that had characterized our relationship seemed to dissipate. Our once joyful interactions were now tinged with tension and sadness. I tried to give him space to process his emotions while also respecting my own need to stay true to my beliefs. It was a difficult balancing act. one that seemed to strain our connection. I began to notice that our friends and family were also affected by our situation. Some expressed sympathy for Ryan, understanding his desire for children and his frustration with my unwillingness to compromise. Others tried to be supportive of my stance, acknowledging my right to make choices about my own life. It was clear that this issue had far-reaching implications, not just for our relationship but for how others perceived it. Ryan's behavior became more erratic. He would sometimes make passive-aggressive comments about our future or about the impact of my decision on our relationship. He seemed to be grappling with a sense of betrayal and loss, as if my refusal to have children was an indictment of our time together. The more he tried to persuade me to change my mind, the more entrenched I felt in my position. I sought advice from friends and therapists, trying to navigate this difficult period with as much grace and clarity as I could muster. I wanted to be empathetic to Ryan's feelings while also standing firm in my own convictions. I understood that this was not just a matter of personal preference, it was about reconciling two fundamentally different life visions. In the end, I had to make a decision about how to move forward. I knew that our relationship was at a critical juncture, and that the differences in our desires for the future could either be a defining challenge or an insurmountable divide. I chose to continue being honest about my feelings, even though it meant facing the possibility of ending our relationship. As time went on, Ryan and I continued to struggle with our differing views. The tension between us was palpable, and the joy we once shared seemed overshadowed by the weight of our unresolved issues. We both had to come to terms with the fact that our dreams for the future were incompatible, and that finding a way to reconcile those differences would require more than just compromise. It would require a fundamental shift in our relationship. In the end, the decision to stay or leave was a deeply personal one, and it was something we both had to face with honesty and introspection. It was not just about whether or not to have children, it was about understanding and accepting each other's core values and dreams. Our journey had brought us to a point of reckoning, and how we chose to navigate it would define the future of our relationship. Navigating this period was challenging, and it required a great deal of emotional strength and self-awareness. I hoped that, regardless of the outcome, both Ryan and I would find a path forward that honored our individual truths and allowed us to build fulfilling lives. Whether together or apart,